live. Hello, everybody. I hope you guys got some really good chats in during that networking session. It was really cool to see how many people ended up in the arts, which is really cool. And yesterday, when I was in person with the gang in Toronto, we had a lot of filmmakers. So I'm very curious kind of what kind of arts you guys were all into. I think a gap year is a great time to really get connected and to test out different artistic mediums and all sorts of stuff. But the reality is it's a great time to start a business. It's a great time to work on personal development. It's a great time to move across the world. There are so many great things that you can do on your gap year. And I'm just a cranky old lady that talks about gap years. But I wanted to bring some friends who actually have done gap years in the recent years to answer all of your questions. And I've got some questions for them as well. And just really a chance to hear it from their perspective. It's so fresh for them. And so I'm going to bring in Claire and Miranda. We're going to join us on stage here. So would love to welcome you guys. It's so great to see your faces again, and to see the smiles and to see you on the other side of your gap year. So welcome back to Gap Year Launch.
Thank you.
Yeah, it's so cool to have you here. Miranda, what was it like a year ago when you were at your gap year launch? This is bringing back some memories?
Yeah, a lot of memories. I was really nervous, I would say. I didn't really know where my gap year was headed, and I kind of felt insecure about that. But I did get some inspiration from this evening and then much more when I did the Frosh weekend as well. So it was definitely a good jumping off point to make me feel like, okay, maybe I can do this.
Yeah, I think it's that's probably a pretty universal sentiment. Claire, would you agree with that when you did it? Because you did it 2 years ago now.
Yeah, absolutely. I would agree with it. I was pretty nervous, but also very excited for what was to come. And it's a lot of unknowns within the year. So yeah, it was a lot to look forward to.
Yeah. Well, and that's what we try and do here is we try and help you connect with other people, not feel so alone. Like you're the only person on this path, and to give you some tips and tricks on how to make it happen. And how to manage everything that's going on in life right now when things are all happening, being so wild. But let's actually get into some questions I have for you. So your gap year was very recent, and everybody has different experiences and learns different things on their gap year. So what would you say is your biggest takeaway from your gap year? So what is the biggest change or the biggest learning or the biggest experience? So what's your biggest takeaway from your gap year?
You can go, Claire, if you'd like.
Sure. I think for me, it was just the concept that it was like kind of a mindset shift that school isn't everything. I know throughout my high school years, I put a lot of emphasis on school, but not really for one particular reason. And so I found that throughout my gap year, I just I took so much valuable understanding of the world around me that I realized hey, there's so much to be gained when I look outside of the formal education system. And it's so important to be able to take that kind of step back from it and be like, this is the world outside of school, and I can benefit from it, and I can learn from it, and what's out there is just as valuable, if not more, than what's in school as well. So yeah, I think that was the most important thing for me, and I'm still taking from that knowledge today as I look towards what I want to do in the future. So
Yeah, that's awesome. Thanks for sharing. Miranda, what about you? What was your biggest takeaway?
I think for me is definitely to be more authentic and listen to my intuition. I used to kind of consider the opinions of the people who I looked up to as kind of fact, and I've learned to really regard my own opinion and my own perspective much more highly. And I've learned to really ask myself, what do I think? What's my intuition saying to me? Who would authentic Miranda be in this situation? And just really have worked on empowering myself, worked on making the decisions that are right for me. And I feel much more authentic than I did a year ago. I feel like the person I'm presenting the world is much more me.
And I hear it also like a theme of trusting yourself and
Yes.
and really just knowing that you are capable and that your values and your thoughts are real and valuable and can guide you in a way that you need to listen to and that other people need to respect as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
I love that. Hardeep, what about you? What was your biggest takeaway?
Yeah, so by the way, hi everyone. Sorry for being a bit late, some tech glitches here on my end. But my biggest takeaway was the world is a very malleable place. And I feel like whenever we grow up, like middle school through high school, everyone has this sort of authority over them, whether it's parents, whether it's teachers, and you always think like you have to follow. Like the how much you can impact the world is very limited. How much you can change it, and I mean, you don't have to be a social activist or like, technologically entrepreneur or whatever. And you could still like do quite a few things that could impact the world in good ways. You could make small communities or like whatever your thing is, make cool YouTube videos. And I think that was my biggest learning that yeah, we're all very capable of things.
That's awesome. Hardeep, I actually shared one of your ambassador videos with a room full of college recruiters,
Cool.
sharing some of your learnings. So you're famous.
Oh, good to know.
So you are making a ripple effect and making change in lots of communities, whether you know it or not. And guys, if you have questions for our alum, please pop them into the chat. Don't let Asmain take over the chat all by himself, talking about Hardeep's hair. Although it does look fantastic, I'm sure other people have some questions too. And yeah, so these were some of your major takeaways, but gap years also are not all rainbows and sunshine and butterflies and unicorns. There are some really challenging things that happen as well. So maybe you can shed some light on what some of those challenges might have been for you on that journey. So I'll leave it to whoever wants to jump in and speak to that first.
Yeah, I can start with that.
Go for it.
So I think one of the easiest things that happened in my gap year was it's so easy to just be alone all of the time. Like you can literally wish shut and no one's gonna say anything to you, and that was pretty difficult. And I think it's so important to just get out there and find community, even though it's like it can be hard, especially because you don't know where to find community. But I think that's where internet is the best place you could imagine. Like you can find people, different communities. I went on like Medium.com groups, like a bunch of those events. And then on Facebook group, Claire actually told me about this group called Yes Theory, and I met so many cool people from that Facebook group. And I also just like sneaked into a bunch of university classes and striked up conversation with people in like the front row. So that was pretty fun. So I mean, you can find ways, but it's important. It was a hard lesson. Like after 3-4 months of like complete isolation, that it's important to like have people around you, even no matter how focused you want to be.
I love that.
Yeah, I totally agree with Hardeep that was something that I struggled with as well. Like just coming out of a very strange time in like high school where it was like, well, we were in the COVID pandemic and then we were online and then we were kind of back in person. And then for myself, one of the things that I had was going to a new country where I didn't know anyone. And so then to be in that new environment and to suddenly not have a structure for making friends because high school is gone, I also found it very easy to sit in isolation if I didn't take any action. And so I think for my biggest like challenge was kind of taking that action in a lot of around a lot of uncertainty.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that 100%. That's like something everyone kind of goes through on their gap year. And I'll add to that, like when you're at a different stage than everyone else your age, or maybe the friends you had from high school, that can be really challenging just to feel like you're maybe falling behind or not on the sort of clear cut path. And I will say, like, I feel like that's something I had to kind of grieve, like this ideal kind of 4 years in a row, like fantasy university experience. Like it just wasn't going to happen. That's something I had to take time to like process and let myself be like, you know what, a part of me wishes that it had. Um, and yet that's not where I am. And I'm really much more happy where I am. So kind of that like grieving process, I feel like is really valid and something that we all go through. And then I feel like on the flip side of like the social aspect, there's also the issue that it's kind of can be hard to find like opportunities like jobs, volunteering to occupy your time. And even if you do find a job, you still may have moments where you feel like you're kind of in stagnation or not a lot is going on. And I feel like the main thing with that is like taking a step back because you're kind of thinking of it in the framework of school, where like every single day you have pre-subscribed classes and you have homework assigned to you. And so thinking of your gap year in that framework rather is really not going to be helpful because it's a much more fluid space to work within. And so creating goals that work for you as opposed to fitting in that framework, I feel like is super important.
Oh my goodness, you guys are so wise. I love it. All right, we got a question from the audience. Melanie wants to know, what was the main reason you decided to take a gap year? So we'll go Claire, then Miranda, then Hardeep on this one.
Okay, so there was a couple of like kind of main reasons. Stuff was kind of like lining up in my life for it to happen. So one of the main things was because my partner, David, we were in an online relationship and he lives in the UK and I'm from Canada.
Oh, we lost your sound again.
Sorry, hello?
Oh, there we go. It works.
Sorry, so basically, I guess one of the main reasons is coming out of the COVID pandemic. I didn't want to go into university directly kind of during that uncertain time. And so it just so happened me wanting to do that aligned very well with my boyfriend, David, who was also taking a gap year. And that's just kind of how it happened. I was like, yeah, I'll take a year from school. And he was already taking a year from school. So, yeah, that's the main reason. But
did you defer your acceptance?
yes, I did. I got into the University of Guelph and then I deferred just over the summer. I didn't even like do it as soon as I decided to take a gap year. I did it after I had paid the residence deposit. So yeah.
In the grand scheme of life, that's not the worst thing that could happen.
Yeah, exactly.
Miranda, what about you? What led up to your gap year?
Well, I would say that I felt like I was in the wrong life situation. So kind of my authenticity to bring that back wasn't really lining up with where I was at. So I kind of took a look at that and I felt like my mental health was kind of deteriorating and there was just so many unanswered questions that I didn't know really what else to do other than take a gap year, and it seemed like a way for me to slow down and reassess. And I feel like, yeah, school in particular, coming straight out of high school can be really overwhelming. So, giving myself that opportunity, I feel like was really kind of one of my biggest moments of self care, which was good.
Yeah, that's huge. And did you take it right after high school?
No, so I did a year of university, my first year, and then I took a gap year, and I've now transferred to another school, and I'm back at university.
Yeah, I love it. So there's no set time when a gap year has to happen. It can happen
No, yeah,
whenever you feel moved and whenever you feel that you need that time.
yeah, 100%. It's more about like, you know, how you're feeling than what stage of life you're at. And I always tell people I took a belated gap year.
Yeah, I love it. Okay, Hardeep, you've got part A and part B to this question.
Yeah, I sure do. So when I took a gap year, I didn't defer my university offers. I the main reason I was saying a gap year was because just some family stuff happening. Also, me not being sure about what program to go into. Also, COVID being there, so it's just like a mix of all circumstances. And that was my first that was my first gap year. And then I went into university at Western. My first program, first preference of studying comp sci, business, and psych. And after first year, I realized that, wow, that was boring as heck. And I was like, I want to do something more exciting for a bit. So now I'm on my second gap year. And yeah, I just basically started like a week, just actually 3 days ago. So that's going well. And yeah,
Yeah, so you can take multiple gap years too,
yeah.
like Hardeep is showcasing, and there's nothing wrong. There's no such thing anymore as a linear pathway, and anybody who tells you there is a boring person who doesn't know very much about themselves, or what else is available in the world. No, I shouldn't say that as a broad sweeping statement, but I think being exposed to the gap year allows you to see other opportunities that are in front of you, and different ways to have your needs and your interests met in a way that is not a formal academic institution, which I think is really, really cool. So Asmain wants to know, what did you wish you had known when you started your gap year? So now that you are older and wiser, if you were in the shoes of the folks here today, just starting, what advice would you give them, or what would you have wish you had known about the experience?
I can chime in a bit on this. I feel like I should have known how less of a crap I need to give about most of the world, because I mean, people talk about how big of a deal it is to take a year off. It really isn't. Like, you're just like making your own path. It doesn't matter if you're graduating uni at 20, 21, 25, 26. It's like, as long as you're getting the experiences you want, you're doing what you want out of your intuition, out of what your well, passion is a very overused word, but like whatever drives you, I think that's the only reasoning you need.
Anybody
I
else want to
feel
jump
like,
in there? Yeah.
yeah, I can jump in on that. I feel like there are a couple things. One that immediately popped into my head was to quit social media. Like, if I can give gappers like one concrete piece of advice, just get off of it. Like, and maybe get back on at some point, but just try it. Like, for whatever, a week, a month, I don't know, up to you. That would be a real big suggestion for me. Um, and in terms of just like how I felt when I started my gap year, I think I was just like a little bit afraid of getting it wrong. But as we've been discussing in this panel here, that's really, you can't do that. And so I wish I had kind of understood that a little more.
Um, that's what this. I don't have exactly an answer, but I felt very inspired by what Hardeep said. So I think maybe I wish I knew what he said.
Yeah, and I like that idea too, that you can't do it wrong, and that there's no timeline. Like,
Hmm.
it's not like by day 5 of your gap year you should have everything planned, and by day 25 you should know who you are and what you want to do with your life, and by month 6 you should have your whole post-secondary life planned out. Like, that's not how development, personal development, professional development, that's not how it happens. There is no formula for it. And a lot of the time, you have to have experiences that you feel are useless or not helpful, or you need to go through those times of isolation that are going to lead to those aha moments and those epiphanies, and that those 12 useless conversations you had with various professionals might lead you to one that's really, really profitable and really, really beneficial. So don't put yourself in don't set up a checklist of timelines of things that need to happen, because it's going to happen on your own timeline. And some of your friends are going to have those aha moments in month 1, and maybe for you it doesn't happen until month 6, 7th, 8th, or 13. And that is totally okay.
Yeah.
So that's kind of where what I hear when I talk to folks as well.
I actually want to say one more thing.
Yeah.
I realized that I think I don't know if this was just me, but like before my gap year, I used to think like being alone and just by being yourself, walking by yourself is like the most depressing thing ever. And I feel like now the coolest people I meet are the people who are the most confident in being alone by themselves. And I feel like that's something I learned in my gap year, which is something that's so important to transition into adulthood because I mean, people do advise you and people guide you, but people can take decisions for you, and being by yourself, reflecting, talking to yourself is such an extremely important skill.
And I think there's a difference between being socially isolated
Yeah.
and like what we were talking about before, and like not getting out
Yeah.
there and connecting with people, and actively being comfortable
Mm-hmm.
with listening to yourself and really getting in touch with your thoughts and your ideas and your emotions, and not running away from them and hiding behind interacting with other humans.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's a fine line there, and I think that's one tricky part to figure out, but I think it's an important part.
I love it. Okay, Matt wants to know, when you went back to school, was it awkward being out of phase with everybody else? So those people that went directly from high school into university, or stepping back in for you, Miranda, was it awkward?
Yeah, I feel like I can't provide the perspective on someone who did a gap year like right after high school, but I will say when I did my first year of university a couple of years ago, due to COVID, the age groups were very skewed. So there were like 21, 20-year-olds, and I was 17. So like there was a really crazy mix of ages. And so that has kind of carried through all the way up until now. And you guys will still be feeling the aftermath of like what COVID kind of shifted, even when you go to school. And as a result, as well, more people are taking gap years. And another point that I just want to throw out there is that at university, like particularly in first and second year courses, you're going to find people of all ages. So, first year, second year, third year, fourth year, it doesn't matter. In those introductory mid level courses, there's so many age groups there. And so, you'll find that you can connect with people younger than you, people older than you. And it's really all about just who they are and not so much the age. So, yeah, that's kind of my 2 cents.
I totally had like the same experience where when I first went to like my classes, like I was like, "Oh, like how old are you guys?" And everyone was a different age, and I actually found out that a lot of the people who I had become friends with had also taken gap years. And a lot of people like take a year off of school and don't call it a gap year either. So it's just like, "Oh, I took a break." But it was more normalized than I thought it was, like going into my gap year. Um, but I will say, like, I did feel a bit of like a separation between a lot of like non-gappers, I would say, but it was more of like a mentality shift. I noticed, at least that a lot of people who have taken gap years were a lot more like sure of themselves and a lot more like sure of why they were in university. And yeah, so I would say it was just that, and there was just like maybe a bit more maturity. Like I know some like gap year students in like first year university who were also in residence like seemed a bit more mature than the ones who hadn't taken a gap year. But yeah, I didn't see it as like a separating factor kind of.
Yeah, neither for me. Actually, like I didn't feel any age, like there was age difference, but like it completely just depended on the vibe. Like if you vibe with someone, like the age really doesn't matter, and that was like one of the things I was very concerned about, and one of the things I think I adapted to more quicker than I imagined. Because when I was initially thinking, when it was September of the year that I was taking a gap year, I was like, wow, it feels weird as heck to see all my friends going uni fresh week on their Instagram stories, and I'm out here just like doing some weird math courses that I don't care about too much. And I think that was actually pretty pivotal to know like that's completely fine. Like, you're not leaving the people that you were supposed to be with, because if you just went into this year with those people, you would not, I can guarantee you wouldn't grow as much as you're gonna grow this year by yourself. And like the people you meet with this level of growth that you achieve in this year are gonna be exponentially different from the people that you would normally interact with if you just didn't take a gap year. So I definitely think there. Don't worry about the age difference or like connecting back to people at all. You're gonna find people all the time.
Yeah, it's weird being a grown up. You can have friends that aren't born in the same birth year as you. Whereas like in high school, like that's the way you move through life. Is like if you were born in the year 2000, you are friends with only people who were born in the year 2000.
Yeah,
And that's such an artificial way that the world works, and that stops in grade 12. Like the second you step out of grade 12, you're never going to have that experience again. So get comfortable with it. And it's really cool because people of all different ages bring so much different perspective, which is really cool.
yeah,
Rowan wants to know, what did you actually do on your gap year? That's a great question. Go for it.
yeah. I can start off. My first gap year, I mostly did a lot of my high school courses for math high school courses that I didn't do before. So I did grade 11 math, grade 12 calculus, and grade 12 advanced functions in like 4 months or 5 months, trying to like get into like a math business or slash CS program. So that's what I did majorly for my gap year. And then I also like just got some family stuff figured out. And then I traveled to India, spent there time there with my family, and like the summer ending my gap year, I mostly did like this tour guide job, which is pretty cool. And yeah, that's what I did for my first gap year. And the second gap year, I'm trying my best to like start this sort of company thing. So let's see how that turns out. And yeah, let's see how my year goes.
I can go next. So on my gap year, I had a lot of jobs. Don't, I maybe had like six in total throughout the whole year, and the most I had at one time was four. So I kind of had a lot of different experiences. I learned a lot about just working in a professional environment, and what I liked to do, what I didn't like to do. But the main reason I was working was just to have like a strong framework to branch off from, and I found that really helpful. Um, I also worked a lot on my mental health. I, read a lot of books. I tried some new practices. I worked with a therapist. So that was like one of my main goals that I worked towards as well. And then the other thing that I was really lucky to do was travel to South America, which I thoroughly enjoyed. I would highly recommend South America. And fun fact, a lot of people on gap years go there, particularly from Britain. So if any of you guys like hanging out with people with British accents, I'd recommend. So yeah, that's kind of like the broad strokes of my gap year.
So for my gap year, yeah, I guess I I went to go hang out with someone with a British accent. That was that was the main. Sorry, it was a good segue. So I went to the UK, and I ended up living with my boyfriend David. And yeah, so that was like the beginning of my gap year. It was very like uh, I just didn't really have like much like forethought into what happened after I got to the UK. But I did end up getting like a tier 5 youth visa. Um, and that's like the traveling, you can like work and travel and live there for up to 2 years, I believe. Yeah, I think that's the International Experience Canada, something like that. I'm sure you guys have like seen stuff about it, but yeah. So I went and did that. Was living with my boyfriend at his parents' place. And so the first thing I did, I guess, I applied for a job. I got a job. I ended up working at a convenience store. Um, kind of kind of went through like the whole arc of like enjoying it at first and then being like I want to go to France. So then I I saved up a bunch and I did a work away in France, um which was really amazing. We like went and stayed at this like villa with this ex fine dining chef guy, and I learned how to put down a concrete floor, which was pretty cool. And then yeah, I came back to Canada almost a year later, and I went and did like a wilderness first responder course because one of the things that I wanted to do was like canoe trip guiding, and so I got like a scholarship to do that. And then yeah, and then over that summer I worked with CanGap actually as the event. Sorry. Yeah, I worked with CanGap. And so yeah, and that was like remote and a really amazing experience. So yeah.
Cool. Thank you for sharing that. Miranda, can you tell us a little bit more about how your travel experience came to be? Because we talked about travel for months and months and months and months. So can you share a little bit about that thought process for you?
Well, there was a lot of thought. Let me just say, I do feel like I kind of overthought it actually to begin with, and I kind of had this particular idea of doing work in Italy, and I really wanted to kind of make that happen, and I just couldn't find like the right company or program to do that with. And so I kind of started to feel like a little bit down and like, is this really gonna work out and all that sort of thing. And then I kind of had like a bit of a mental health crisis and I felt really stagnant and stuck. Like I was mentioning, like this is just a thing that kind of happens on your gap year. And I realized that I was really putting off travel at that point, and it was something that I had put like on my list of goals. So I looked into a company called G Adventures, which I would highly, highly recommend to all of you, just because of how well organized the trips are. And they are trips that are going to give you a lot of room to be independent, a lot of room to meet usually more mature people, and just a lot of room to like do your own thing while in a secure and like safe framework. So I signed up for that like on a whim, basically. And then I had to like go to all my jobs and tell them all that I needed a month off, blah, blah, blah. And I will say, just a little anecdote for you. On my first day in Buenos Aires, I think I cried for like 4 hours straight. um, and it was like one of the most challenging things I've ever had to overcome. But by the end, I was having the time of my life. I personally didn't do any work abroad or workaways, Maxim, but maybe some of the other alum can speak to that.
I did
We
a
can't hear you
work
up there.
away.
Oh, there we go.
Oh, wait.
Now it's working
Can you hear
now.
me now?
Yeah.
Okay, I'm not gonna move.
Don't move. The cord is
So
loose.
so I did a workaway. My advice for finding like good, safe workaways is to look at the reviews. I personally began to trust Workaway a lot because their moderators are really strict with like the comments and reviews that they get that people send. You know, if there's something of concern, they will go in and directly like talk to the person who raised the concern, and then take down the posting from the site if it was like a real like, you know, and a very bad thing. um and my recommendation would be to look for well reviewed workaways. And then what you can actually do is message the people on the site who have like done the workaway and left a review. If you do that and chat with a few of them and like just ask to talk about their experience a bit more, like if you have any concerns, then to like raise it with them. And I also think just talking to the workaway host and getting like a sense of like, what you want out of the trip and what they want out of you, kind of to build our relationship before it even begins. I'd also say like make a contingency plan, like make a plan for like if it doesn't go well, if you're suddenly in this country and you're like, I am here for a day, but I don't like the vibe. It's okay to step away. It's okay to like just have a plan for like if that happens. And then of course, if you feel more comfortable with it, it's okay to like go for the first few times with a friend or trying to find a travel buddy. But yeah, always like general safety tips. Always let your parent or person you trust know where you are, what you're doing, when you're doing it. Like have a communication kind of open line there as to what's happening, because I think it'll make you both feel safer. um, but yeah, workaways, they can be a very fulfilling experience as long as you do your research and you are safe about it. Yeah.
I love it. And for those of you who don't know what a workaway is, basically you exchange your labor on a project that somebody has posted in exchange for room and board. So a place to stay, food, and all of the terms of that is different for each posting. So you read it and see how much work they want you to do and what they're going to provide in return. And it's everything from developing websites to painting barns to harvesting fruit. Like it really is a little bit of everything. So you can check it out. Really cool organization and really cool things you can do on your gap year with that. Okay. My last question for you before I let you go, because I'm old and need to go to bed. My last question for you is, what resources does CanGap provide that all these folks should really, really tap into? What were some of the pieces, obviously aside from the Frosh Week and launch, because they're already here, what was some of the things that you took away from the resources that we provided?
Yeah, I can speak a bit to that. I haven't gotten the scholarship, but I know people have gotten it. Definitely apply. We're all students. I know you won't say you're broke, but I know you're broke, so apply the scholarship. And I also think book these sessions with Michelle whenever you can, in like one-on-one sessions, just to like talk your ideas. I feel like if I didn't have Michelle, I would have gone absolutely insane. So definitely apply. Better than a therapist, in my opinion. And
Don't go that far.
no,
Different type of help.
I'm pretty confident in my analysis, but yeah, those are the biggest two the best two things I got out of CanGap, and also just the community. Like, be active on Gapper Connect, talk to other people. It can be actually pretty fun. I mean, usually I know people don't usually come on voice channels, but the people who do, and they're pretty cool. I know. I'd come on the voice channels with Esme, Rena, and Hargun, and Claire sometimes, and it was pretty lit. So definitely do that. Pretty cool to get connected with people in the same boat.
Yeah, absolutely. I think like one of the things that helped me a ton from CanGap was just like having Michelle there and being able to chat with her. I kind of think of Michelle as like and anyone from the CanGap team really as a kind of like a gap year guidance counselor who like actually gets what you're going through. That was a lot of G's. Um Yeah, someone who like actually gets what you're going through and is able to like talk you and guide you through it, because your gap year experience, like it's a super unique experience, and having someone there to just like help you through it and to help you process it, and like everything that you're going through is like really important. And yeah, as well, CanGap, I'd say the like the gap year planner was very helpful. And yeah, and also Gapper Connect and just like getting to know other gap year students, because like we talked about before, it can be like pretty isolating on your gap year, and just having those avenues to like reach out to people who get what you're talking about and who are going through something similar can be really validating. So yeah.
I'll say for my part that the accelerator program was really helpful for me. I was kind of like on a consistent path of like completing the um the badges like earlier on in the year, and then I kind of fell off of it a bit and needed to catch up a little later on in the year. But I found each of them like incredibly helpful just because it kind of held me accountable, since every single one of those badges were something that were part of my goals and that I did want to work on. It held me accountable to that goal. And it created a like a framework and like things to check off that I should know or be capable of doing at this point in order to feel like I've actually kind of improved on that area. So like financial literacy was a big one for me. Also just like wellness was another big one. So those two modules like really helped me check in on those areas. And I'll also say the Frosh Week, I know you already did it, but I'll just say that I did meet someone there who I'm still friends with today. So if you did meet anyone and you felt connected to them, please stay in touch because I think you'll find it really useful, even if it is just to talk about like simple playing gap yourself and nothing else. I think you'll really find that helpful.
Amazing. And I am paying them to be here, but I'm not paying them to say these things. I did not give them a script. I gave them the questions. They're coming up with that. But I am paying them for their time because it is so valuable to have your voices here today and sharing your experiences and your learnings and kind of paying it forward in a way, and helping those that were in your shoes last year or the year before being able to navigate it and to validate a lot of the things that they're experiencing and showing them the light at the end of the tunnel, that they will figure it out and it will be okay. And life goes on and it can be a very powerful experience. So any last words from any of you? Any other wisdom you want to drop? Do a little mic drop, end of session information that you didn't get a chance to share? I'm putting you on the spot here. This was not one of the scripted questions.
I feel like I have just a really quick answer to that, which is like give yourself some grace. I feel like we often attribute like all the pressures in our life to outside sources, but we're the ones who are actually letting those affect us. And we have the option to say, actually, no, I'm not going to take that pressure from this outside source, and I'm going to listen to myself instead. And so that's you. You can do that. And anything people tell you, you don't actually have to accept it. And I believe in all of you guys. So shout out gappers. Have a good time.
Mic drop.
Yeah. And I'll just say that the coolest people I've met in my life somehow always coincidentally happen to be people who have taken gap years. So I don't think that's a coincidence. So I'll leave it at there.
You guys pretty much said it. I think just to like echo what Miranda said, like listen to yourself, listen to what you need, and just take that time for self-reflection as well. Because you're worth it, and even though like there's going to be a lot of times during your year where you're like stressed out and you don't know what's happening and you don't know where to go next, I think so much can be gained from like just sitting back, having that self-reflection, and knowing that in the end it'll all be okay. So yeah.
That's awesome. Thank you so much for joining us. I really am so honored that you still are connected. And I love even just the 5 minutes before we started our official chat, hearing about all of your adventures and where you're at. It's such a special time in life. And I'm just so glad that you guys we're all still connected. It makes me feel just like all warm and fuzzy inside. So thanks so much for joining us tonight. And I know everybody that was here is really benefiting from your wisdom. So thank you so much. Don't be strangers. Let's all go out for coffee sometime. And Hardeep, I heard you met up with Rena without me. And that's a problem. So busted. No, I'm just kidding. I'm old and cranky. I was probably asleep by the time you went out. It's fine. All right. Thanks for coming, guys. I'm going to take you off the screen and wrap up with everyone else. All right. Thanks, guys. Amazing. So we are coming up to the end of our Gap Year launch event, believe it or not. I'm so glad you guys stuck it out with us. It has been such a blast to share all of these insights with you over the course of the last 2 days, and to be able to really kick off your Gap Year in a very meaningful way. So again, like I said at the beginning, I want to